All right, welcome everyone to today's SIP webinar, our Impact Grant Bootcamp. My name is Colleen Musinski and I help run the Community Investments Program here at the Elks National Foundation, along with my trustee colleagues Jocelyn Moya and Chelsea Dennis. Our office is here Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 Central Standard Time, and we're here to help you get grants. So please call and email us. We're happy to provide any program information you ever need, along with any sort of assistance, ideas, you name it, we can help. But today, what we're doing is we're talking about impact grants. Now, the word boot camp might sound a little bit scary, but I promise you it's not as scary as it seems. We're going to go over some tips and tricks to fill out your strongest impact grant application you possibly can, and go over the deadlines and a little bit more about the grant and what we're looking for, and it's going to be comprehensive, and I'm excited to share all of this knowledge with you. So first, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Specifically, here's some webinar information we like to show at the beginning of each webinar. If you're having trouble hearing me, please turn up your volume on your computer. And if at any point you get disconnected, simply click on the email link again and re-enter the meeting. You can also call our office at any time if you're having any issues. And a recording of this webinar will be posted tomorrow at enf.elks.org/SIP-resources. So you'll be able to share it, watch it again, and pause it, anything you need. So if you'd like to submit a question, there's a question box on the right-hand side in that area of the screen. And if you need to leave early, feel free to leave your email address and name with that question, and I'd be happy to get back with you shortly. So, all right, now that we got that out of the way, let's dive right into 2017 impact grants. And here's a quick summary. We're pleased to announce this year that we're adding $100,000 to the impact grant pool, which brings the total funds available to a record $600,000. This is the very first year we've increased the pool by that much. Last year we awarded 63 grants and awarded all $500,000 we had available. So our board approved an increase of $100,000, so we have more money to work with for the impact grant program. So impact grants are awarded in amounts between $2,500 and $10,000. They're the largest and therefore the most competitive grant opportunity we have available. And elk involvement is key. That is bold right there, uppercase on key. Elk involvement is key to securing an impact grant and key to the success of an impact grant project. It's what we're looking for. I'm going to say it a lot through these next slides, so hopefully you don't get too tired of me saying it, but Elks involvement is key to securing an impact grant. Two other just housekeeping things. The application deadline is September 9th at 12 noon Central Time. Write that down, mark it down. September 9th, 12 noon, Central Standard Time. We're here in Chicago, and there are no exceptions to that deadline. Recipients will be announced in late October, and the grant is to be used for the calendar year of 2017. So, a little bit of background on how we award these impact grants. Grants are awarded out of the $600,000 grant pool. New applicants and renewal grants of up to 3 years are considered first, and then if there's any leftover funds in the pool, we will award lodges applying for project funding beyond 3 years. So what that means for those listening who already have an impact grant, we look at and fund projects that are in their second and third year first. Then we look at those new applications. So if this is your very first time applying, we look at new applications after we award funds to our second and third year. And then again, once all of that has been awarded, we do look at lodges who are looking for funding beyond 3 years. And we do have lodges out there who are on their 8th and 9th year of impact grant funding. So big pool, and also a big pool of people looking for funding. So in that way, it's our most competitive grant, like I had mentioned. So it's an exciting opportunity to make a large-scale impact in your community. So, what is an impact grant? Well, impact grants must be the following. They must be charitable and address a local need. They must have significant Elks involvement. I think I have mentioned that. Again, if you're keeping count, that's number 2. And that means that a substantial number of Elks must actively participate by giving their time and support to the project. Impact grants must also be ongoing projects, and they cannot be one-time events. Impact grant projects must improve the lives of a target population and not simply one individual or a family. Impact grants must be practical and results-oriented, and they must have visible Elks identification and leadership. And where can you find all this information, you may ask? It's all posted on the Impact Grant webpage. So if you need a quick reference, don't hesitate to go to enf.elks.org/impactgrant. And you can also look in our handy Lodge Grants field guide, which was new this year. It was sent to all Lodge secretaries in June. And there's a 2-page spread on the impact grant with these important reminders printed right on there. So keep all this in mind when you're formulating a project. Keep it at the forefront when you're filling out that application, and also keep it at the forefront when you're running the project. They're very important must-haves for a successful impact grant project. All right, so that was the positives. Let's go through the negatives now. Impact grants can't. What impact grants can't do? Impact grants cannot be a donation of funds or supplies to another organization. So if your idea right now for an impact grant project is handing over a $10,000 check to, say, the Boys and Girls Club or you know, the Red Cross, that is not what we're looking for with an impact grant. Impact grants cannot pay salaries or personnel costs for another organization. They cannot establish or increase a foundation, trust, or other interest-bearing account. Impact grants cannot fund a large one-time item purchase, like a vehicle or a large piece of equipment. And most importantly, the impact grant cannot be a small part of a large community capital campaign fund. These are specific IRS guidelines for a grant this size. And you know, if you're looking to partner, which we'll talk about a little bit later, make sure to keep all of this in mind. We want this to be something that the Elks have ownership of, that your lodge has ownership of from start to finish, and that you're known in the community for. If you're just one small drop in a large bucket, you know, that's great and all, but that's not within the spirit and the guidelines of the impact grant. This is yours. This is your lodge's opportunity to shine and to tackle a real problem in your community, and to be the people that people in your community look to for help, and to be the organization in your community that other community members look to as people who are really making a big difference. So again, all this information can be found on the Impact Grant webpage, and in that SIP field guide, all the do's and don'ts, the musts and can'ts. This is all important information that you need to keep in mind when formulating your project. Worst case scenario would be if you don't pay attention to these can'ts and you dive in on a project that happens to be part of a large community capital campaign fund, for example. You know, it's not going to be funded right off the bat, and I wouldn't want you to waste all of that time and energy on something that wouldn't qualify in the first place. So very important information to keep in mind. So now that we've kind of gone over the basics, we've kind of gone over the who, what, where, when, and why of the impact grant, we've gone over the musts and the can'ts, let's talk about putting an idea into action, having an idea and formulating it into something that could be a qualifying impact grant project, and not only a qualifying impact grant project, but an impact grant project that will get funded. So I have this really nice, hopefully easy to understand logic model up here. It's a fancy word for just a roadmap, and this is kind of what I like to suggest that lodges do when they're just starting out with an idea. And you know, so the first thing you need to do is pinpoint a problem in your community, and this is your big picture goal. It should dictate every aspect of the project for your application. After you pinpoint a big picture problem, you need to identify a community need. Now, both of those things sound very, very similar, and I understand there's a lot of overlap, but what I mean by this is you need to identify what is missing from your community. This is your objective. What does your community need in order to help solve what you've pinpointed in number 1? So big picture number 1, we're going a little bit smaller. What is the community missing that will help solve the big picture problem? And once you've gotten that kind of down, then you move on to number 3, which is to create a project. You want to create your project based on your goals and your objectives. You want to create a project based on number 1 and number 2, based on the big picture problem and the community need that you'd like to fill. So that's all well and good, but let's talk about a practical example of this. So how do we put this logic model, this idea, into action? So I have just a basic example for you here. So what is the pinpointing the big problem? The big picture problem that I've decided to pinpoint is childhood obesity. So that's what I've pinpointed as a big picture problem that I think that my lodge could help tackle. So what is a community need that speaks to that big picture problem? What is an objective that will help the big picture problem pinpointed above? Well, an example might be more healthy food options for children, right? That's something maybe that my community is missing, and that if we had it, we'd be able to help tackle the problem of childhood obesity. So given 1 and 2, what are some potential projects? So potential projects might be a community garden, a backpack program, healthy living after school programs, a fresh produce in the local pantry. Those are specific potential projects that not only would help the big picture problem and fulfill that community need, but also have the opportunity for hands-on elk involvement. So just an idea, an example of putting ideas into action. Another example might be a big picture issue might be veterans homelessness. That's a big problem in areas of the community, areas of the country, big and small. So what's a community need? Maybe food, shelter, and clothing options for these veterans. That's the need that you would like to fill. So potential projects might be veterans stand down, or monthly dinners for homeless veterans with clothes and supplies to give away, perhaps a welcome home initiative in your lodge. Those are just, again, another potential projects that speak to number 1 and number 2 of this particular logic model. So I highly suggest that you look at this model as a way to start thinking of ideas and putting those ideas into action, starting with some big picture and filtering it down to something that the lodge can move on, the lodge can have an action on. And as long as number 1 and number 2, as long as your goals and your objectives speak directly to everything you'd like to do, and if that's consistent throughout not only your planning process, but your application, then you're in good shape. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more in pinpointing a big picture problem. So when I had just thrown out the big picture problem of childhood obesity, that was just something that I had come up with based on, based on a big picture problem in my community. But if you have a general idea or are not 100% sure on a big picture problem, you want to, here are some tips on finding one. And this is, again, the foundation of your project. Impact grants need to go way beyond simply a nice thing to do. An example of this might be your city might be spending a lot of money on fireworks each 4th of July, and they could use a donation. Lack of fireworks is not a big picture problem. But what is a big picture problem? Well, a big picture problem that you might want to address instead might be, the ones that we've talked about already. So, again, going back to that example, sure, $10,000 would be great to donate to, but it's simply a nice thing to do. You're not pinpointing and making an action on something that is an actual charitable problem in your community. So what do you need to do to find these problems? What do you need to do to find this big goal? Do some basic investigating into your community's big issues. Use something called the Kids Count Data Book. This is sponsored by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. If you're interested in running a project that speaks and helps youth in your community, this is a great resource. It has statistics broken down by community and state that speak directly to your area. So use a resource like that. Look at local nonprofit and social service initiatives that are already happening in your community, with the caveat and reminder that the impact grant funds can't be donated to these initiatives, and make sure you don't duplicate services. But you can look to what's already going on in your community, what people are already finding as big picture problems, and kind of use that as a jumping off point. Something that I don't think a lot of people think of is, look at your local newspaper, what you hear on the radio, look at online forums. What are people talking about in your community? For example, the impetus of one of our impact grants out in Princeton, Illinois, was that the project manager had just recently applied for a gratitude grant for a youth awards night, which doesn't qualify under enough grant guidelines anymore, but she had said that she had applied and then was in the car listening to the radio, and there was a public service announcement about the statistics in her particular rural community, speaking to how many children go hungry every night. And it could just kind of hit a light bulb in her head, and she thought about how the lodge could help with that particular problem. And so she went and rewrote the gratitude grant for that, for feeding kids, and it blossomed into a weekly dinner for those in need. So, you might read a write-up on a child struggling with a specific problem in your community, some sort of investigative reporting on some issue that's very specific to your community. Those are great places and resources to look. In addition, you want to make sure you specify a population to serve. So impact grants need to focus in on one target population. So what we mean by that is, if you'd like to help youth, find that problem with youth. If you'd like to help veterans, find that problem within veterans. The impact grant can't go towards helping more than one target population. We do want you to kind of pinpoint, like I had said, and focus in on one specific. And this may sound counterintuitive for a large grant opportunity, but make sure you start small. Rather than try to reach all kids in your community, target one school or one grade or even one classroom. It's the quality and not the quantity that you would like to serve. It's the quality of services that you'd like to bring to the table with this grant, and not the number of people you would like to serve. Although that is important, again, start small. Look at specifics when you're looking for a target population to serve. And cast a wide net. What I mean by that is, when you're looking for ideas, make sure you talk to anyone and everyone. Don't just focus on who you've helped before. Think about specific populations of, for example, families in need to serve. If you do a Christmas project every year, perhaps there's a Christmas basket program every year, perhaps there's a specific population within even that population that you'd like to serve. Perhaps you like to serve, women who are going through domestic violence issues, or veterans within that population. So cast a wide net, look everywhere for ideas for this foundation of your project. All right, like I said, there's some overlap here, and it can get a little bit confusing, but I'll try to make it as clear as possible. So when we're talking about big picture problems, pinpointing that big picture problem, that is your goal. That is a large idea that you would like to help tackle. Now, identifying a community need is going in a little bit smaller, right? So like the childhood obesity example. That was number one. That was your large-scale, big-picture problem. Now we're talking about identifying a community need. So with that foundation set, it's time to plan. And you want to, Consider what the community needs to tackle that big picture issue. And you want to make a list of these community needs and speak to people who aren't Elks. Talk to firefighters, teachers, neighbors, friends, and other community groups. When you approach potential partners, make sure they understand that the elk involvement aspect of this project is clear. Encourage suggestions around your lodge and present the problem at a meeting. Consider all possibilities for elk involvement and don't start from scratch. And what that means is when you speak with local groups and they have an awesome program already, you don't want to duplicate that program for that exact same set of kids or that exact same set of target population in need. And that's just, simple logic, correct? If you already have an organization, for example, that's running a backpack program at elementary school A in your community, well, why would you want $10,000 to do that exact same thing at elementary school A when elementary school B over here has nothing, right? You want to speak to that local group that's already running it and then use that advice and use that partnership to help somewhere else. Look to other communities tackling similar problems. Talk to, people in your county, people in your state, maybe talk to other elk friends you have across the country. And the last one is very key, and it's something that's most often overlooked. The best way to see what someone needs is to ask them, right? If you're looking to help a particular population in need, ask them what they need. For example, if you're looking to help teens stay away from drugs and alcohol, you want to ask teens in your community what opportunities are missing. If you're looking to serve veterans in need, same way. Ask them about gaps in services or what they could really use in times of crisis. Sometimes it's something as simple as that, a simple conversation with someone you'd like to help that really can get and help you identify what is needed. And then something to keep in mind as well, make sure that the lodge has a vote on the project at an official meeting, okay? So once you've pinpointed your big picture problem and once you've done your research and identified a need you'd like to fill, make sure that everyone is involved with this. Make sure that the lodge knows about it, and once you've come to conclusion on who you'd like to help and how, make sure that everyone's involved with that. All right, so what does this all mean for the giant beast that is the impact grant application? If you've gotten a chance to look at the impact grant application already, you can see that there's quite a few questions. It's much more involved than our other grant opportunities, mostly because, like I had said on the onset, it's our largest and most competitive grant opportunity. But right there on your screen, you can see specifically the two areas of the application, the two questions that speak directly to the big picture problem and the community need. This connects directly to these questions, and the questions are as follows. Identify the community need your project will address, and in parentheses it says, this is the case for why your lodge needs the impact grant funds. Please provide data and evidence that your lodge is working to address an important community issue. Focus on the local aspects of the project. So there it is, the community need and your big picture problem. Both of those need to be addressed right here in this area. And this is where you can pull out those stats from the Kids Count data book, or the census, or other resources that have statistics ready and available specific to your community. This is where you make your case. This is where you show that you've done your research. You've pinpointed that big picture problem and you've found a community need that you will address. And question 2, how did your lodge determine the need for this project? What kind of research did the lodge conduct? Did the lodge discuss this project with other groups, organizations, or individuals in the community? Does your lodge have any partners in this project? So this speaks directly to the research that you've done on your big picture project and the big picture problem and the community need. This speaks directly to all those conversations you've had and really just kind of tells the narrative of how you've come to the conclusion that this is a need in your community. So notice that the first question specifies local, and this is just a tip for when you're writing the answer to this question. Bring it home and make it real to the reader. Be clear about the problem and the most common error is to confuse the need with the solution. That sounds a little bit confusing, but I'll give you an example. Say you want to provide an after-school program and you've determined that one of the needs is having a van. The van that you want is actually part of the solution. The problem is actually a growing drug problem among youth, for example. The need is for a safe, drug-free, nurturing learning environment with fun-filled educational and enrichment opportunities for children in need, while providing an adequate means of transportation is part of the solution. So really what that's saying is what we've been saying in the slides before. Back it up, right? Get that big picture problem, show how you've seen that this is a problem in your community through statistics, show how you've researched what the community need is, and those two connect directly to these application questions, and those two speak directly to the problem that you want to address, right? So don't confuse the solution with the need, and we'll go through resources where this is written down very clearly, so you have it for reference. We'll go through that in a little bit. So again, real world examples, these are the two questions that are right there on that application, and some tips on how to bring it home to what we've just learned about big picture problems and community needs. All right, so this is a lot of text, and this is a lot to keep in mind. So I would recommend using the handouts that I had just mentioned that we'll go over on the Impact Grant website. And these come directly from Jerry Willis, who runs our Impact Grant seminar at convention. She's a professional grant writer, and she has these great tips for strong, effective applications. So in order to make your case as effectively as possible, make sure you answer the answers to the questions in the first section do the following. So those two questions that we just went over, make sure that your answer does all of this, and it's a lot. Make sure you describe the target populations to be served, define the community need and problem to be addressed, and not the lodge needs or problems. Include quantitative and qualitative data, documentation, and supporting information. Do not use any unsupported assumptions. Describe the situation in terms that are both factual and of human interest. Make sure that your answers are supported by statements from local, regional, and state authorities. So those are the statistics we were talking about. Make sure that they're free of jargon. That's something good to keep in mind. For example, if you have some sort of if you have an organization name that has if you have, for example, an organization that has a lot of letters in their name, you know, make sure you define all those letters. Make sure you're also succinct and interesting to read. I know that there's so much on here. You're gonna say, how the heck am I going to be succinct? Just make sure you know what you're putting in is only what you need. Not a lot of fluff. Not a lot of adjectives. Not a lot of filler. You know, make sure you're as succinct as possible. And then make sure you make a compelling case, but also make sure that you have that solution, right? So, you know, you want to present this problem and this need in your community in a way that shows that it's something that is dire and it's something that is needed, but it's something that's not insurmountable, right? It's something that the Elks can swoop in and help with. So keep all these in mind. Again, they're on a really nice handout that I'll point to at the end. And as long as you do all this in your first couple questions, you're good to go. So again, it seems like a lot. I promise you it's not. It's doable. But good tips to keep in mind when you're filling out those first couple questions. All right, so now that you've done all that, it's time to plan that project. And with the project and the need to find with the problem and the need to find the project is gravy, right? So it's not an easy add-on like gravy exactly, but if your community need is potatoes, the project should add something important and flavorful to the need, just like gravy, right? So you want to make sure that you're laying out your project in a way that clearly connects to the problem and the community need, and and that is straightforward and also fun, right? This is the fun part of the application. This is where you get to brag about what your lodge can accomplish. It's it's what you can, when you can talk exactly what you like to do, and you can be clear about what you can accomplish. So be clear, be thoughtful, and be sure to brag about your lodge, right? So here are some tips when you're planning that project. You want to make sure that you consider your lodge's strengths. So for example, if you have certain facilities or professionals as members that you might be able to engage through the project, connections to other organizations working on the same problem, or an already established pattern or passion for community needs. So what that means is, what is your lodge already passionate about? What does your lodge already do? What have you already engaged your members in? You can use those as a jumping off point to plan your project. Be deliberate and upfront about elk involvement. Like I've mentioned a couple times before, elk involvement is key. Establish a timeline that works for all parties, and what that means is establish a timeline that works for not only partners that you'd like to have, but your general membership. Make sure that it falls in line with what you can accomplish. Make sure you bring everyone to the table and assign those roles early. As specific and deliberate as you can be about those roles and expectations from the very get-go, the more successful your project will be down the road, and the more strong your application will be when you're looking for funding. So make sure everyone's on the same page. When you're planning the project, everyone should have a say, and assign those roles, those specifics early. We'll go through in a little bit some trip-ups and some places that a lot of lodges fall down on the application, and one thing is those specifics just aren't there on the project. Lodges do a great job with the stuff we've talked about before. They do a great job showing that there's a community need. They do a great job pinpointing a large, big picture problem, but then when it comes to the specifics of the project, that's where they fall down. So make sure you're keeping all of this in mind when you actually start planning your project. So the project information should be thoroughly laid out in the following questions. So here we go again. Here are two specific questions on the actual impact grant application that speak directly to how lodges lay out their applications. So you want to be clear as possible here. This is where you describe the who, what, where, when, and why, and how. You've already described the why, but you want to make sure you answer all of these questions here. So these sections are the logistics. You don't want to skimp on details here. This is asking specifically what the lodge is doing, and you want to demonstrate that you have that plan that we've talked about. And in the second question, you see, given your lodge's description of the project, you want to break down the project in terms of volunteer activities, duties, and committees. You want to make sure you know how many Elks will be needed to complete each activity, and you want to make sure that, again, like we've talked about many times before, that elk involvement is key. So this area of the application should be thoroughly laid out and very specific. All right, so like I had mentioned, we're going to go through now some common missteps on the application. So you've gotten a taste on what it takes to fill out an application, and some specific questions and how they relate to the exercises that we've talked about in planning a project, identifying a need and a problem. So we're going to go through 4 reasons. These are the 4 most common reasons projects aren't funded, and so hopefully you can learn from these mistakes and have a takeaway here. All right, so the first common misstep is that there's not enough elk involvement, and I've said it a million times, so I'm sorry that I'm harping, but it is one of the most common missteps, that there's not enough elk involvement laid out in the application in order to fund the impact grant. So it's one of the most important things we look for. Projects should require elk volunteers, as in without elks, this project would not be able to happen. You want to be clear and detailed about how lodge members will be involved, and you want to keep in mind that impact grant funds may not be donated. If there's any sort of even question on the application or sense that the application reader might get that the lodge could just simply donate the funds, that is not good. So a good example, a real-world example of this is actually Hopkins, Minnesota, Lodge number 2221. They're Teaming Up for Teens program, which is right there, a great picture right there on the slide. So what they do out there in Minnesota is they do monthly packing events for homeless teens in their suburban area. And then coupled with that, they do events with these teens, and they have a key group of core volunteers that are constantly in contact with the organizations that they partner with. So this is a project that is bringing together organizations all for a common good. This is a project that gets the entire Elk community involved and the community as a whole involved in physically packing, and it has that large-scale Elk involvement that's key. The reason they got funded is because that was clear on the onset. It was clear to the application reader and the reviewer that the Elks would be doing this from start to finish. There was no question that the Elks would be the ones carrying it through. Now, if they had skimped on the details on Elk involvement and made it kind of seem like they were just going to simply hand over a check or hand over a pile of supplies without any sort of thought, it would not have gotten funded. But the project manager did such a great job of not only demonstrating that she understood the problem that they'd like to tackle, but really had a clear idea about how the Elks could step in an active way. So make sure that that Elk involvement is clear as crystal on your application. All right, another common misstep is there's just simply not enough planning. And, you know, we've touched upon this a little bit already, but a good idea is just not enough. Your lodge needs to have a plan. You need to know the details, including how often activities will occur, how many Elks are needed, and how the funds will be spent. And you don't want to infer these decisions that will be made later. I've read many an application in which the lodge actually states that we're not sure now, but we'll figure it out. That's not what we're looking for. That does not inspire confidence. You want to make sure that you can show that you've got this on lockdown. You know what you're doing, you understand the problem, and you're going to do it with this money. And that also connects to the budget, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So a good example of this is Laughlin, Nevada, Lodge number 2872 with their Read to Succeed program. I remember that application specifically because they did such a great job breaking down the Elk involvement by month and by number of Elks needed. They had an idea of how often Elks would be needed, how many they would be needed, and exactly which activities they'd be doing with these kids on a consistent basis. There was no doubt in my mind that those Elks were taking this project from start to finish. There was no doubt that they had planned this for a long time. It showed in the answers to their questions. And it also showed that they were planning ahead. They were thinking about things that, you know, might happen. They were thinking about, you know, if we get discounts on books here, we'll be able to spend money here, right? They were thinking about, you know, in case of weather, we'll do this instead. They had a backup plan B and C if A didn't work out, and that was very clear on their application. So not enough planning is a very common misstep on an impact grant application, and you want to make sure that you, again, show that you've got this. So all right, common misstep number 3 is the application is unclear. So impact grants are competitive and applications are final once they're submitted. So once you click that submit button on an impact grant application, you can't go back and edit. So that being said, you want to make sure your application is clear and understandable before you submit it. So often we receive applications for projects that sound like they could be good, but we don't have enough information to make a decision. We can't make any assumptions and we can't read your mind, so make sure everything's on there. So a good tip on this is have someone unfamiliar with the project proofread the application. It's a really good practice so that, you know, someone else has eyes on this, and, you know, ask them, what do you think we want to do after reading? And if they give you a succinct summary of what you'd like to do and it's correct, then you know you're on the right track. So I can't tell you how disheartening it is when I read an application that does such a great job of pinpointing a big picture problem, but then after that they don't give enough information or they're very unclear about what they would like to do. So make sure that it's clear, again, I say it again, clear as crystal about what you would like to do. Make sure that you're answering the question that is asked, and I know that sounds pretty intuitive, but you'd be surprised. Read that question 2 or 3 times to make sure that you know what it's asking, and make sure you address every point in it. Some of these questions have questions within questions, so make sure that you're speaking and addressing every point asked. All right, and the last common misstep, and one of the big ones, is that the budget is a mess. And this can go one of 2 ways, either too much information or not enough at all. So you want to make sure you clearly illustrate what funds will be used for. Justify in detail the use clearly in the narrative, and focus on the E&F funds. I know a lot of lodges get tripped up on the in-kind donations and the other columns that are present in this particular budget for the application. But what we're most interested in is to see how you would spend that $10,000. So a tip on this is, we've said it before, donations do not qualify. So if your budget simply has a $10,000 line item in equipment and the narrative reads 1 sentence long, that does not inspire confidence that the lodge would be doing anything outside of donating. And that's just being transparent and practical, and really that's the best advice I can give. You want to make sure that you give all the information that you need and detail in the line items what exactly you'd be purchasing. And this is the most important thing, that the bottom. Don't add information about the project that is not mentioned in other places on the application. There should not be any surprises in the budget. That is very important. Make sure that the budget speaks clearly to the rest of the application, and make sure that you're not adding things that don't speak to anything you've talked about before. I remember I've read applications before in which they go into detail about a specific hands-on elk involvement project. They go on and on about these events that they're going to run, and then all of a sudden, bam, I get to the budget. 1 sentence, $10,000 for a tractor or for a van. And it's like, what? Where did that come from? You never even mentioned a tractor before, but somehow it's here, you know? And that's just, you want to make sure that you're not surprising your reader. It would be such a bummer to spend so much time and effort on the rest of the application and fall down on your budget. It's maybe the easiest thing to overlook. Jerry Willis, again, who does our Impact Grant seminar at convention, she recommends that you look at the beginning of the application, you look at those 2 questions we talked about very first, the ones that connect to your community need, and then you look at the budget next. So don't leave it to the end. Then spent so much time planning for this. Make sure your budget is practical, make sure it's clear, make sure it speaks to your application. This is the best words of advice that I can give about the budget, and really honestly, it's a very common misstep and something that I hope you take to heart when you're filling out the application. So, so those are your common missteps, just 4 of them. They really kind of speak to all the problems we most often see on applications that just don't quite cut it for the Impact Grant. So before you click that submit button, make sure you call or email us. You can do any of the following. You can talk about project ideas, ask questions about partnerships. I can read a rough draft review. I can review a rough draft, no problem. Ask specific questions about this application. Ask about similar projects, and most importantly, don't waste the last minute. Especially if you'd like me to review your application before you click that submit button, make sure you get it to me a couple weeks before, just so I'll have time to give you thoughtful advice. So don't be afraid to call. Again, I hope it's clear from this boot camp that this is a big endeavor. It's a commitment of time and money and blood, sweat, and tears, and I want you to be successful. So in that way, all this planning and stuff, I want you to have the best chance possible of getting funded, because if you're passionate about tackling a project in your community, then so am I. So don't wait to the last minute to get it all in. Be thoughtful about all this information and the timeline it'll take you to get it all done. So it's a lot, but you can do it. So where can you find all this stuff that I've been talking about, right? I have mentioned this, you know, this flyer for a little bit and you're like, where is this? So this is exactly where it is. You want to visit enf.elks.org/impact-grant. Right there in the green, it says click here to view guidelines, read application tips, and access the application. Click right there, and then this is what you have at your fingertips. You have an impact grant scoring form. So this is the actual form that we use to score impact grant applications. So we're as transparent as we can possibly be about what we're looking for. Applications need to score at least 70 points in order to move on to a general review. So basically we do it in two steps, right? Our staff reads all the applications thoroughly and scores them using this score sheet. As long as your application gets at least 70, then you move on to the next step where we can talk about your application more in depth in order to decide on funding. You have the impact grant guidelines right there at your fingertips. You have an impact grant toolbox, which is chock full of specific links to places where you can look for those statistics, for example, that we've talked about, talking about sustainability and other information about what you should be thinking about when you're undertaking this endeavor. There's impact grant FAQs, which go in a little bit more depth about specifics and questions that we get most often. There's that impact grant convention seminar slide. So those are the slides from Jerry Willis's presentation along with her handout right there, which is very, very helpful. If you don't do any of this, you should at least click on that impact grant convention seminar handout. It is fantastic. It has so much information and clearly shows and lays down what we're looking for. And then she also provided a list of action verbs, which are good reminders of what kind of language you should use in your application to show that you're taking action, right? So all of these resources are right at your fingertips here at the Impact Grant website. Make sure you look at it. It's not a suggestion. In order to submit a strong application, it's imperative you do your research and it's imperative you look at all this stuff. If there's something on here that you see as missing, let me know. We can always throw up as many resources, the more the better. So make sure you check this out before you click that submit button. You know, even more information than you could possibly ever want about the Impact Grant right there at your fingertips. All right, so that was a quick boot camp, right? I only talked my head off for 45 minutes and I gave you a lot of information. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, like I had said, to call or email me at any time and I can walk you through any part of this. So if you're itching for even more education opportunities, here's our 2016-17 webinar schedule. So through January, we have a lot more opportunities to learn more about effective grant use and specifics about the grant opportunities we have available. So mark them down on your calendar, visit the SIP resources page again where we post all of our webinars and learn even more. And so with that, I'll just reiterate, make sure you contact us. Here's our contact information. There's the website, our direct line, and our email. If you have any questions, please give me a call, shoot me an email. If you'd like a copy of these slides in PDF form, I'd be happy to send those along as well. If you're doing any sort of presentation for, say, a district or a state meeting, I would also be more than happy to provide you with resources and PowerPoints if you ever need them. So always happy to help. So with that, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to see you're interested in taking down the Impact Grant, and I hope that I've given you some ideas. I hope I've given you some tips, and I hope I've given you the confidence that you can tackle this and create not only a great program that'll make a impact in your community, but will make the Lodge proud. So with that, thanks again, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.